good morning, or good lunchtime, depending on where you are. Would like to introduce our guest speaker today. This is Hudson Brock. He is sometimes known as the Brocket Ship. Exciting name. He's a founder and team builder, and he's a strategist who's passionate about helping leaders build teams that grow with them. I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is really just building, building something great that takes more than just vision. It's really taking the right team. So we want to have an interactive session today. So feel free to jump in with your questions, and we'll also do a Q&A at the end. And I'm sure that he'll have some questions for the group as well. We'll have an interactive session where we'll talk a lot about how do you hire the right role at the right time, balance culture fit and capability, and create that team that grows with you. And I think as well, if you're more on the side of being the person who's looking to join a team, I think this is an excellent place for you to understand what does that mindset look like and how can you integrate with that. So with that, let me hand it over to you, Hudson.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone on the West Coast. I'm over here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So it is lunchtime in the Eastern time zone. And it's a rainy day in Chattanooga. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but perfect day to be at home talking about building teams. That's what I love talking about. Um, so I'll give a quick intro, and then I would love to take a minute and just have anyone that's open to sharing 10-second bio on your name, where you are, and then I'd really like to know which side of the equation you're on, whether you're thinking about right now the candidate side of how do I land on the right team, or the hiring side of how do I add the right person to my team. And if you're on that side, I'd love to know if you're at the kind of the solopreneur that's looking to make their first couple hires in a startup, more at the startup phase that's looking to scale up, or at a more mature like enterprise type company. So a little bit about me. Born and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We're right in between Nashville and Atlanta, if you've never been here. Um, I am the oldest of six kids and 21 cousins who all grew up in pretty close proximity. And so I think nature versus nurture leadership has always been a lane raised in South Carolina. That's great. Um, so yeah, leadership has always been, I think, a part of nature and nurture for me, and then a sense of team. Vanjie, who's on here as well as marketing lead for us at Alohire, and she's a part of a big family. We talk about this a lot. When you're a part of a big family, you make decisions as a group a lot, and I think that that applies to most business teams as well. So that's the way that I think. Um, I grew up playing soccer and sports, played soccer through college, and I think right around my junior year of college is where I would say my recruiting journey began. I was a pretty good soccer player, but never the best on the team. Always more of the culture guy and the people that the person that liked to facilitate. I was a center mid, so didn't score all the goals, but was in the mix a lot. And if you played soccer, please let me know. That'll be fun to work in more. But my senior year, I ended up recruiting five different people, friends and family members from different schools, to all transfer to this little college, Covenant College here outside of Chattanooga, to play one season of soccer together. And they were all pretty much all better players than me. But because of our relationship, they're like, yeah, let's give it a go. And it ended up being a blast. We got to go win our conference, go to the national tournament. And I just remember thinking, this is the most fun thing. Um, I get to bring people together around a common vision, and I don't have to be the best player if I can lead and facilitate. We can have the best team. And so from there, I was like, I wonder if I could ever make money doing that. But recruiting was not a major in college. It wasn't a class offered, and I didn't see a lot of content being put out about it. This was 10, 15 years ago. So I took the first job I could get coming out of a liberal arts college, which was in supply chain and logistics. I moved across the country to Chino, California, if anyone is familiar with there. And I ran a distribution center. And that was an incredible experience. I feel like I got an informal MBA in culture change and people leadership, and did that for a couple years. Kind of saw the trajectory, the corporate ladder that could be climbed in supply chain. It was much more of a clear path. But as I was out living out in Los Angeles, I started to see more of the entrepreneurial scene, the tech scene happening there, and got really excited about how I could be more entrepreneurial and start to design my schedule, my life a little bit more around my work. And so took the leap in 2017 to become an entrepreneur, initially a solopreneur. I joined a recruiting collective called Mary's Group that was a very cool model, similar to a lot of real estate groups where each individual had their own LLC, their own individual brand, but there was a centralized back office and umbrella that allowed us to be in business for ourselves, but not by ourselves. And through that, got to partner with a bunch of different companies to help them make important hires. Lots of tech companies, lots of software engineering, software sales types of roles. I did not grow up technical. We got a computer, I think my sophomore year of high school in my home. And then I was one of the weirdos that didn't get a cell phone until college. So I had to learn a lot fast about all the different programming languages and different trends that were happening and how people in tech talked and thought. I said y'all a lot since I'm from Tennessee, and for a while I felt like I had to convince people that I knew what I was talking about. I think now people understand that's like the greatest invention ever out of Tennessee. But yeah, that was a very fun experience, kind of learning the California way of life, learning the tech scene. Then in 2020, we found out we were having our second kid and COVID hit. And so we decided to move home to Chattanooga. And when I got back, I was continuing to work remotely, mainly with companies on the West Coast. But as I started networking, I was like, man, there's really not a hometown agency that is being loud on LinkedIn, that understands the digital side and the importance of personal brand and marketing, but who's also very intimately connected to the local community and the business ecosystem here. And so that was really the impetus for AlloHire, my current recruiting agency, and we've now been running that. This is year 5, and we have had a blast. We're very boutique. We've got 11 people currently. We've partnered with over 50 companies to make um, primarily specialized full-time hires. So 6-figure and up type of roles. Um, we started heavily focused on tech, and then as we've wanted to do more locally and regionally, we've shifted to do more in supply chain and manufacturing and a little bit of everything, honestly. We have not niched down into just like one type of role or one company. So it's very dynamic, very fun. And the whole idea of Allo Hire is the root word allo, means other, different. And I really liked the idea of allocentrism, which means being other-centered. It's the opposite of egocentrism. And to me, that's what differentiates what I would call a true agent from someone that is just operating in a more transactional manner. So someone that's actually able to be other-centered and understand their priorities, their values, enough to represent them in whatever deal or partnership they're looking to create. And so in recruiting, what that looks like is on both sides, with the hiring party really trying to be other-centered with them, understand what they're trying to solve and what that means to them personally, how that's going to impact their life positively. And then on the individual job seeker side, same thing, right? What's their priority? What are they trying to solve? How does this fit into them as a whole person? Because we don't just live to work. And and then how do you match those people? And so a lot of recruiting talks about matching skill sets, right? A piece of paper and a resume to a piece of paper and a job description. And that does serve a purpose. That can be a conversation starter, but it's really, really basic and boring if you ask me. And AI can do that probably better than any of us. What we have to really be good at is matching the person to the person. And that's where the nuance and the art is in hiring. And so I'm excited to dive into some of that. I'm obsessed with it. I feel like I'm still learning every day. There's so many good books out there and podcasts that I love consuming. And it's fun to have Vanjie on here. As I mentioned, she runs marketing for us, and she's been a big part of our journey of just telling our story and continuing to document really like what we're learning as we're learning it. So not trying to always act like we're thought leaders that have it all put together, but welcoming people into the arena of entrepreneurship with us. So that's the main thing I work on, and then just to tie in a couple other side projects I think they'll be interesting for the conversation. This past, I guess, 3 years, we launched a co-working space that's very intentionally curated to be a grassroots founders hub. And so we've got about 30, I think we're at like 32 members now, based in Chattanooga. It skews towards entrepreneurs and founders. We've got a lot of solo founders or founders with less than 10 employees. And we named it the Arena after the Teddy Roosevelt quote, "Man in the Arena." And that's the idea of how can we be in this arena of building businesses, building careers alongside each other and learn together the networking effects of how we can share things that we're learning, share partnerships, share resources has really helped all of us to grow faster. And so we're still very early stage in that. We've had one company out of that space that got acquired. We've got several that just raised some funding, and it's been a great lead generator for AlloHire as well because we get to know these people, work alongside them, and then as they look to make their first couple hires, we get to be positioned very well to be an extension of them and their brand. So that's one of the things. And then the newest one that I'm working on is a platform called Shadow. You won't see anything if you Google it yet. I think we just created a LinkedIn page, but we're going to be facilitating young professionals shadowing more seasoned professionals in industries that they're interested in. Piloting initially with local universities, so seniors who are looking to get exposure. I don't know about y'all, but when I was a senior and everyone would ask me, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I have no idea. I'm going to throw something out there. I'm going to say something in HR because that'll make them nod and smile." And I have no idea what that means. And so for me, it was so helpful to go shadow a couple people, see what a day in the life looked like, what it actually felt like to be in that job. And that's what we want to give back to other people. So if that strikes a chord with anyone, happy to talk offline about the shadowing stuff we're working on. And then I think we'll level it up from there to a lot of other things. Like we probably all have someone that we would love to shadow, and we don't really have a mechanism for that. There's cool apps like Cameo, where you could get a video from someone, or Intro, where you could book like a 15-minute virtual call. I think there's one called Forage, where you can virtually shadow someone for a day. But I get pretty tired of just like listening in on Zoom meetings. And so I'm very interested in this in person, in real life experience. So stay tuned for that. We got big dreams. And then the one other one that is fun is an adventure race called Expedition. We just did our first one here in Chattanooga in April and May, and that's one that's kind of like if an Ironman and a Spartan race had a baby. That'd be the easiest way to say it. So multidisciplinary, outdoors, paddleboarding, some functional fitness, some rucking, some running. So if anyone's into that, we'll be running it back spring of 2026, and would love to have you. All right, that's a lot about me. I want to pause for a minute and invite anyone that's open to sharing, just real quick, like I said, who you are, where you are, which side of the equation you're on, employee, employer, or job seeker, hiring manager.
Okay, I'll go. I'm a solopreneur. I have my own business, so I'm actually just more here to really understand just the market in general. Like since I work with clients who are sometimes looking for a job, but also in my previous career, I used to do a lot of hiring for my teams, and so really being able to kind of like bridge the gap, see how things have changed, see where people are in terms of their headspace, and maybe eventually when I scale my own coaching business big enough, be able to hire someone to support me.
So coaching is the core function of the business.
Mhm.
Great. In any specific domain?
I call myself a breakup artist. So
Hmm.
the domain is across all life work. It's really seeing everything holistically and understanding where people have toxic relationships with any person, place, or pattern and helping them break up with that.
Hmm. Fascinating.
You know
Thanks.
anyone?
Yeah. All right. Who else? Look at the chat too.
I'm happy to go. My name is Kim Martin. I'm currently in the job search, and my next role will be a hiring manager. I was a hiring manager before, so I'm always interested in better understanding how to look for talent, how to be aware of my biases, and yet not let them get in the way of hiring people who can actually add and complement, who can be additive and accretive and just value adding on their own and be able to spot unique special talent and leverage that on the team versus just trying to create echo chambers and just
Hmm.
people that look like me or sound like me or act like me.
Yeah, let's go. Real quick, sorry if you mentioned it, but what's your core function that you like to provide?
Uh, core function. Oh, well, I guess, oh, I see what you're saying. Product strategy, either
Products.
in UX or commercialization.
Great. Thanks. Anybody else?
I'll go. I'm Shalini. I think I introed at the beginning. I'm a Sidebar member and have been here in Sidebar for about a year. And I actually just wanted to kind of jump in and do more with Sidebar because I really like this community. Topic itself is of interest to me more on the job seeker side. I'm more with a large company right now, but I thought this was really interesting to look at just learning about if you are a hiring manager, if you are a founder, how do people think? What does that look like in terms of the market impact or in terms of what people look for? And then how do those of us who may be in the seeker side or in the future seeker side, maybe future hiring manager side as well, how do we think about pulling all of this information together?
That's great. And thank you for facilitating, Shalini. I don't know if I mentioned it, but Brandon Clift was the connection to Sidebar. If anyone's overlapped with him, he's one of our members in the arena, the co-working space, and become a good friend. Big fan of Brandon's, and I'm sure he's a fantastic facilitator as well. Anyone else? I got a couple people, but if you're listening in, don't feel like you need to jump on. Cool. All right. We'll keep going. So I think the big thing, if you could only take away one thing, this is what I would leave you with. On either side of the equation, we're playing the infinite game. If anyone's familiar with Simon Sinek, I'd be shocked if you hadn't heard something of his. He's been someone that I've really appreciated learning from. We were fortunate to do some work for one of his companies a couple years back and kind of see not just his ideas, but how they actually were applied in one of his businesses. And the idea of start with why we've all heard about, I think that is critical on either side as the individual that's looking for a job or that's hiring. You need to know who you are, you need to know what you're about, and you need to be able to say that in a way that someone else can hold on to. So differentiated enough, show a little personality, and be prepared to share that. We've all heard talks about that. I think it's so important. My favorite idea of his kind of takes that a level up, and it's the idea of the infinite game and really viewing the different games of business that we play, not as something that's going to be finite, that's either won or lost through a deal or an offer or a hire, but as an infinite game where we are continually playing to build trust and to build the opportunity to collaborate with people and to compete with people. And to that, I think on either side, if you come in with that posture, it depressurizes any conversation because you're not as focused on what can I get in this moment or how can I impress the other person. You're focused on how can I build trust and rapport that continues to open the opportunities to collaborate. And if you mirror that with, I also really know who I am and what I'm about, like Kim and Elizabeth, what you said, you're quickly able to say, this is the function, this is why I'm doing it. Um, that opens the door for me to know, okay, I can now be thinking about people that might be needing some breakup coaching, or someone that needs a product strategist. Um, and I would say too that the ability to interact like this is amazing. As we all know, the in-person side is, in my opinion, a huge differentiator right now. So if you can take one thing away on either side, play the infinite game with people. If you're really passionate about the work you're doing and you think you're going to be in it for the next 10, 20 years, or even maybe the next 5+ years, think big picture like that. With all the people you interact with, think, is there an opportunity that we could collaborate sometime over the next decade? And if so, how do I lay the foundation for that? And there'll be times where like, this is something that I need to pursue very intentionally right now. And that is important to figure out how to navigate. But I can't tell you how valuable that's been for me over the past decade being in this space, and how I think I'm just scratching the surface of what it will become in the form of referrals, in the form of people that are bringing ideas to me now and wanting to start things. Pretty much all the things that I've started outside of Aloe have been other people coming and saying, "Hey, I really want to start this. Would you partner with me in some capacity?" And that's been exciting. There's times where it can be distracting, but I think that is a result of being very relationship oriented and thinking outside of just the next year, the next 2 years. The people that think 10 years plus are very unique. So take that into whatever space that you're in. Now let's talk a little bit more tactically about hiring. So I think on either side, if you know your why, you think about the infinite game, then you need to figure out how to communicate to the right people. And an acronym that we've talked a lot about in terms of advancement is PIE, uh, PIE. So those are the three main factors that go into your opportunities for advancement. P stands for performance, I stands for image, E stands for exposure. Most of the time, we're taught growing up that P performance is going to be your number one driver of advancement. And while part of me really wishes that was true, it's just not true. And so performance stands for about 10%. The next is image. So you could put that into all kinds of different things, personal brand today, digitally and in person. How do you make sure that those are aligned so people don't have a very different experience of you digitally versus in person? We've probably all been there. We're like, oh, wow, you're different than I thought. And that's confusing. That accounts for somewhere around 30% of your opportunities for advancement. So it really matters that you're authentic, you have an image that you show up into any room, any space with. And then finally, it's exposure. And so who actually interacts with and sees your performance and your image? And then conversely, who are you being able to see and interact with that expands your horizons? I think ambition comes from exposure. And so you need to see what's possible to be able to start reverse engineering how you want to get there. So on both sides, I think that's very important. And as you're thinking about hiring someone or being hired, think about how you are, one, having integrity in your performance. Like that 10%, I never want to devalue because I think that's what it means to be excellent. And we all want to be excellent in what we do, to have a sense of craftsmanship. But once you have that core skill in coaching or product or marketing or community building with Sidebar, how do you then start to incorporate that into your image? And that can be silly little things like I'm regularly going to wear a Chattanooga hat to brand my city, or I'm going to wear like this Aloe Hire shirt. You know, we all have those little things that go into it. It's your headline on LinkedIn that I'm sure you've talked about in Sidebar. How do you very quickly show some like this is my primary billboard that you're going to see for understanding who I am and how I can support you? Your about section below that, making sure that that's not just a chat GPT or third-party blurb that talks about your accomplishments, but actually shows some personality and some passion for the work. Um, the whole rocket ship thing for me, it's so cheesy. Like rocket ship's a play on my last name. We've all seen a gazillion rocket ship emojis. I think AI's kind of hijacked it. Now it's just so overused. I think when I first started using it, it wasn't as common, but I do think that's been memorable, and so that's been something where I've had random people reach out and call me the rocket ship, and there's something to that that starts to build rapport faster. And so not everyone has to have a silly nickname, but if you find something that you're able to tie your name to that's memorable, I do think that that matters in your image. And then exposure wise, I think Sidebar is doing this. All of you have invested in getting to know other people and giving your work more of a microphone to an audience, to a community, and then vice versa, seeing a bunch of other people's businesses or careers and skill sets to understand what's made them successful and what's made them be able to grow. So take that as another thing in terms of pie. Now we're talking about specific hiring. So much of the interview process, whether you're a candidate or a hiring manager, is just trying to figure out what problems are we trying to solve. And like I said earlier, it's not just a piece of paper of this is your, job qualifications, 3 skill sets, core responsibilities, 6 bullet points. Um, that should start the conversation, but you should very quickly be able to get into what function are we performing and what problem are we trying to solve? And if we're successful, where are we going? How are we going to continue to grow together? And I can't tell you how simple that sounds, and yet how rare it is to find someone that's really good at asking the questions on either side to pull that out and to not just look at what is someone's track record, but what's their trajectory? Where are they actually wanting to go? Um, Adam Grant wrote this book called Hidden Potential. Some of you might have heard of it. We talk about this idea of freaks of nature when someone just, genius IQ or incredible basketball player, whatever it is. Did you just raise your hand, Elizabeth? I thought she was saying I'm an incredible basketball player. Um, but the idea of a freak of nurture uh, and that idea of hidden potential is looking more at, how is someone trending based on their trajectory and the nurturing and the environment that they're in. Um, and so that's something that I think is a huge miss in most interviews or most uh, really interviews on both sides, but trying to actually get beneath that to understand the trajectory of a company and of an individual. So that's kind of the art that I'm thinking about every day. I want to take a second and pause there. And um, I don't know if Elizabeth had to drop. Did she just hop off? Okay, Kim, I'm curious for you if that strikes a chord at all and what you're thinking through with your current situation, exploring opportunities.
Yeah, that's a bullseye for me. And I've just learned, I mean, the type of leadership roles that I am looking at and having conversations around, I've explicitly asked what problems, what challenges, and what opportunities are you all prioritizing, and where have you prioritized them this year, given the time of year that we're at, and where have you, like, where's the gaps to those? So I'm just curious, like, what would they focused on in 2024? What is their delta to that? And assuming they might have exceeded some areas, assuming they might have fallen short in others, because I'm hoping that, for me, I'm looking at very ambitious teams. So I'm hoping that they've fallen short. Otherwise, they're just not ambitious enough. And that's actually my signal. And I use all that to help myself understand, are they more internally problem oriented within the organization? Is there a lot more political strife, tension? Like, how is that versus perhaps more of the external competitive pressures that they might be focused on. And it's been really interesting to see the different types of organizations, because for me, it's been a signal of their culture. It's been a signal of like how much they can actually get done, where I might have to face my biggest tensions, things like that.
Hmm. In terms of the, I think that's such a great way of putting it. And the delta over the past year or so is a great indicator. Um, have you, that makes me think that you're looking at larger companies.
Yeah,
If you're seeing some of the
I've done both.
bureaucratic stuff. Do
Yeah.
you have a target in mind?
Target type of company.
Yeah, or size,
Yeah,
stage.
yeah. These are large public enterprise, and these are large public enterprises. So currently, I'm talking to a bank. These are also large merchant service providers, payment companies. So I'm looking specifically at merchant services, e-commerce payments. I have a domain expertise in B2B or business type banking and payments. So B2B to B, B2B to C. So I generally work with the provider of the platform or service solution, and then selling that to the end corporate, and then that end user can be a consumer or small business.
Got it. Yeah, very helpful. So much of, yeah, I think the way that I've been framing this is more on the smaller side, but it really applies to the larger company. It can just be harder to get the feel of a big company, right? You're really looking more at that department, that smaller team, and the individual leader that you would be working for and with within that team.
I think I view this, given I've spent most of my career in large enterprises, I view this as an onion. It
Hmm.
is harder because it's more complex and more layered. And sometimes we as humans want very clear, very like surface level, yes, this is the clear challenge. And for smaller companies, Series B and below, I think that's easier to be able to clarify. I think that it oversimplifies the market problems that even a Series B or Series A is trying to solve for. But for bigger, larger enterprises like the public entities that I'm looking at, where there are hundreds of thousands of employees, yes, the internal challenges are sometimes just as important, if not bigger, than the
Hmm.
market competitive pressures. And I think that for me, I enjoy complexity. I enjoy a lot of gray areas because it requires me to be a lot more on top of my game in multiple areas.
Hmm. Yeah, it's always painful to me when there's more of the internal conflict than the external competition. I lean way more towards the smaller companies for that reason. I like the flat organization structures, but I think I have so much respect for people that can navigate the complexity and sometimes the politics of a bigger company and understand how to make alliances and build trust across departments. So thank you for sharing that context. I think that's really helpful. I'm curious if you've found those are all the right questions. Have you gotten good answers throughout the interview process to where it's a signal, you're not going to know for sure, but you've had more or less confidence to move forward or to withdraw based on the leader's perspective on that?
Yeah, so because this is a bank specifically that I've been most progressed in my conversations, but again, these are all large enterprises, they'll only divulge so much information. But I always find that what they don't divulge is even just as telling. Because I
Hmm.
ask pretty direct and pointed questions now, and what they don't talk about or what they choose to selectively highlight for me is even telling. And right now, when I've asked about what are their challenges, what are their problems, what opportunities are they trying to capture, it is all centered on internal tensions and
Hmm.
internal competitive pressures, which tells me where they are in their transformation maturity, and perhaps like where this internal tension and problems that they're so focused on can start to leave gaps in the external competitive pressures and focus. And for me, I find that as an opportunity to say, hey, listen, the internal stuff, like that isn't my problem, in the sense that like I can navigate through that. And here's how I've done that. The external stuff that you guys might not be spending more of your attention on, like that's where I'll bring in something different for you all. Like I'll
Hmm.
bring more of that in.
Yeah, that's a great way of framing it. Hopefully that's striking a chord with good leaders too. They would understand the value prop there. We talk a lot about the two very simple acronyms, one, the ideal candidate profile, and then two, the employer value prop and how you align those. So ideal candidate profile, we always put through the framework of the ideal team player from Patrick Lencioni, humble, hungry, smart. That's just the baseline, right? Is someone humble? Are they able to think about other people? Are they able to be coachable and learn? That to me is a non-negotiable with anyone that we're going to work with. The hungry piece is such a big spectrum, and I think it's easy to be like, we want everyone to be hungry, and you can so quickly find someone that is, maybe even you sometimes can, where you're like, I'm really hungry to go and solve these big market problems. And they're like, well, maybe let's not care that much about that. Let's just focus on this, solving this piece that will reduce some friction internally. And so I think we see that all the time where how do you gauge the appropriate level of hunger for a role and how quickly someone wants to be promoted and to have a bigger scope of work? And can the organization actually provide that? And then finally, the smart piece, we've probably all talked about. It's much more EQ, emotional intelligence focused than IQ. How do you really understand how to be a part of a team, how to communicate well? So that's like the baseline that we're always looking for on the ideal candidate profile. And can the hiring manager actually articulate that beyond these high level core values that everyone's going to throw out? So this is what we're about. And kind of what are the secondary things of what it actually means? So if a company says we care about generosity, or if it's a small business, it's like, okay, great. What does that mean? Does that mean you're generous with your employees and compensation and bonuses? Does that mean that you are just wanting to be generous to your shareholders? Does that mean that you are going to create a donor advised fund and give to the community? Or does it mean that the executives are just going to take out as much as they can and maybe they'll individually be generous? So there's all those different kind of secondary values that I think can create a lot of the misalignment, and just being able to go beyond, all right, show me what that core value actually looks like in practice. And on the flip side, if you're going to say, here's what I'm about, actually be able to speak to that through stories from your career and just from your life. I think the personal side can be woven in really well too. So that's what we're always looking for on the candidate side. And then on the employer value prop side, as an agency, we want to make sure that we want to put our name on the line of whatever company or hiring manager is hiring. So baseline is, would we want to work for or with them? And then we can put our name on the line and go ask other people to explore that. And when we do that, we're really looking for their ability to articulate, this is our promise to our people. This is what we are going to um, this is what we're going to give them, whether they work here. And I think the right leaders now understand that might be 2 to 3 years, and it might be hopefully longer. But if it is 2 to 3 years, how are we honest about that? And how do we actually set things up where that's a win-win over that time frame and we both get an ROI? And so I think that's the other side of beyond the core values. How do you actually articulate what growth means? How do you actually articulate, what the department or team's success looks like, not just the company's top line revenue or headcount growth or market share, but the individual team feeling like they're actually winning. So that's, yeah, hopefully that touches on both sides of kind of how we're thinking about it. There's so much kind of other stuff that I'm thinking through that's much more on the founder side of putting together those first functional leaders and ensuring that they're functioning well together. But I don't know that that is as relevant for this conversation. Any of that, do you feel like you're on the employer value prop side? Cam, you feel like you're seeing that as more of a topic of conversation from leaders and that in it, like the shorter stint being embraced?
Mm, Given today's market, because it's such an employer's market, I think in my experience, and I've been in the job search, I've been actively job searching since January of this year. I
Hmm.
would say the conversation around the employer value props and differentiation and what they can offer to an employee, some of a lot of that hasn't been as discussed, even though I think we know the dance. I'm an employee, I'm a candidate, I'm interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing me, ideally. I think that because of such quantity and supply of high quality talent in the market and the levels that I'm looking at specifically, it is more of an employer's market. So their value proposition, their need to differentiate, their need to compete for talent just isn't as strong, in my opinion. And so I would ideally like to hear more of a potential employer talk about their value proposition, sell a little bit to me, right? And that's not ego driven. That's like, help me understand like what makes you all a different culture, even within the team or within the organization. And I think that, and again, I've been talking to Series B, Series C and D, all the way up to large enterprises. And I think it's just very interesting how I've had a pretty consistent experience that none of them have really talked about like what their specific value props are.
That's really interesting. And I would say I've experienced that as well. And it's a big shift from 2021, 2022, when everything was employer value prop, candidate driven market. We're going to tell you what you need to hear. We're going to make, we'll move mountains for A players to make sure we hire them. It's been hard to see that shift in some ways. Hopefully, the market will level out and be more even again. But I totally agree. AI is a fascinating thing right now. These big corporate layoffs, there's a lot of amazing people in the market. And I do think this gives us job security, but I don't like it that the application function is very broken. I would say we're probably at the lowest level of confidence in for candidates in the application process, just to hear anything back. And if you do hear back, not just even after interviews, to not just get a canned HR response, but to actually get meaningful feedback on your candidacy and why you weren't the right fit. So I agree with you on that. I really hope that shifts. 2021, 2022, that was way on the other side. We were seeing the craziest offers and counter offers and everything get thrown out there. But leveling out a little bit in 2026 would be fantastic. Okay, would you agree on that too, on the application thing? Just a lot of lack of transparency on kind of where you stand in the process and how to navigate it.
Yes and no. I have not, every single application that I've submitted this year has been all through referral. And that was intentional and strategic. I do not apply anymore unless it is referred in.
Hmm. Yeah, so that would, yeah, that would affirm it, I think. The research that I've seen, I need to look at the latest, that referrals are 5 times more likely to get hired and have at least twice the retention rate. And so uh, absolutely on both sides of the equation. Referrals are gold. We all have to check ourselves and our biases. And, if you're, anytime I get introduced to a friend, I'm always going to look at them through rose-colored glasses and I'm going to have to kind of think through that. But it is such a faster trust builder and differentiator. So I think that's a brilliant strategy. Also on the hiring side, having having pipelines and partnerships, even if that's just individuals who are super connectors and domain experts who can text intro you to people or who can um, kind of share opportunities with their networks. That's been priceless for us because when you're small, you're limited. And if you're individual, there's only so many LinkedIn messages you can send. There's only so many networking events you can go to. But if you have 10 people that are willing to go to bat for you, to either refer you someone or refer you to a company, that is, I would say, just that alone, like 10 people that are willing to do that for you would put you in the top 1% of job seekers. So that's great to hear.
I am curious, and I'm not trying to make this about you and I, Hudson, but I am curious about when you are working with hiring managers or teams,
Mhm.
like, let me ask this, are you working mostly with the HR team of the hiring companies, or are you able to actually work with the hiring managers themselves as well in order to coach them through even looking at applications, interviewing, and even onboarding? Like, where do you all begin and end your coaching journey?
Mhm.
And who are your stakeholders? I'm just curious.
So we've done all of it. I can tell you my favorite is when we get referred to an executive at the company and they're bought in to the ROI of the partnership. And then they connect us to the hiring manager that has the opening. And we align with them from the very beginning. And then we bring in HR to actually run the process. That drives the best alignment. That is not always possible. Very often, agencies are having to start with HR. There's serious gatekeeping, there's a lot of red tape, and I think in general, there's a common trend of HR trying to shield the hiring manager from the agency. And that creates a game of telephone because you're having to um, have a middle person that all communications flow through. And so, as much as possible, we try to honor HR, work hand in hand with them, but really be an extension of the brand and communicate directly with the hiring manager. Once the executives bought in, depending on the level of the role, they don't need to be informed on everything. But the hiring manager, we want to know if they call, we want to know if we call, they're excited to answer and they're going to view us as a partner to talk through, a thought partner. And then vice versa, when they call, we're excited because we know them and we know that they're calling to actually solution. So that's what I would say. It's going to be interesting to see how that continues to evolve. But I think if you're going to be, like I was talking about, true agent that's allocentric on both sides, the person that's really feeling the pain point of the hire not being there is likely the hiring manager. And so you want to be able to actually work through that with them directly. And I think on the job seeker side, in an employer-driven market, you have to think like a marketer and you have to think, how am I going to solve this individual person's problem right now? Like what friction are they feeling and how can I speak to that? And if as long as that's authentic to you, right, you don't want to say something that's not that you can't solve or that you don't actually want to do. But that's what's going to speak the most. If I have someone reach out to me and they can pinpoint uh, a problem for me, I'm going to respond to that email. It's not going to be one of the 18 AI generated message emails that I receive a day from someone that's wanting to do lead gen for us. It's going to be someone that actually understands how we want to operate in a relational referral based way, and how to solve that problem. So that I think we already touched on that, but the marketer piece and then how quickly can you actually network to the decision maker, which hopefully is the hiring manager. When organizations don't give the hiring manager full agency to make the hires, that's really tough. And you have to think with the complexity thing you were talking about, Kim, you have to be able to understand how decisions are made. That can take multiple conversations. One person can think they can make it and tell you they can make it, and then you can find them getting stalled and have to kind of do your research on why. But yeah, that's a good question. Um, we got a couple minutes left. I want to make sure if there's any other questions or comments, anything specific that we can talk through. Those are the big picture things. Vanjie, feel free to chime in if you're still with us. If there's anything that I missed. Now you hear me talk about this stuff all the time.
I mean, I think you're crushing it for sure. I think all of that is super helpful and helpful to hear it again and again. So nothing really to add on my side.
Yeah, Hudson, I'll jump in with a question. I know that a lot of what we just talked about is like this mentality of also what relates to the job seekers. I think if we think back though to like, is there not a secret sauce, but rather maybe what's one factor that the people who are the seekers or want to eventually maybe have their own teams, like what is something that we just don't know? Like what would be a surprise factor that is so innate to a founder who's really looking about building a team, founder or hiring manager looking about building a team? Is there anything that's like a surprise factor?
Surprise factor. So if I'm a founder and I'm interviewing someone, what's a surprising thing that would really stand out to me?
Not so much a surprising thing that stands out to the founder about the person, but rather like, what is something that those of us on the other side just don't even know about within this process?
I think so often, yeah, for a founder or hiring manager, you're just juggling so many things, and the interview process, or even just the process of an exploratory intro call with any type of partner, can be fairly routine and scripted, and yet you can just have so many things pulling for your attention at any time. And so I think the people that are able to break the script and and actually start to understand what is solving a problem, like we were talking about for the founder, like, that will get that will trigger the dopamine of probably not just the founder, any leader to say, this is worth giving all my attention to. And I've seen it so many times, even in interviews, important interviews, people get distracted. They're getting pings, their brains going off in different directions. And so I think just the ability to break the script really human to human and understand what are we trying to solve here. Um, that's not a secret sauce necessarily. Like that's not like a question or or one thing that you can guarantee will work. But I've just noticed that a lot, especially with younger talent, um, having a harder time navigating the flow of a conversation and understanding what's actually interesting to the other party. You know that line, to be interesting, be interested? I think that's just gold. And in any conversation, like I've had so many candidate conversations with a lot of times like a high level software engineer, and they don't want to hear anything salesy from me. What they do want, and so there can be a lot of times where I'm like, how am I going to actually get this person to open up? And then as soon as we find the thing they're interested in, that they're passionate about, they'll talk for 10 minutes straight. And all of a sudden their energy is up and they're ideating, and it kind of creates a space where we can be creative together. And so we've all probably experienced that in conversation, but trusting that we have way more in common, we can find a way to connect if we'll both commit to a little bit of the awkwardness or a question that doesn't land, or something that feels a little bit clunky. We'll find it. And when we do, we can do something cool there. That doesn't mean it's going to lead to a deal or a hire, right? But that's the infinite game of maybe then 3 years later, we remembered that conversation. That other person's got promoted, started something else, and they send you a LinkedIn message like, hey, I just remember how you made me feel, that you actually cared about what I was working on in that moment. And I wanted to check back in and tell you about what I'm doing now. That that's probably the best thing that I can give you in terms of secret sauce.
And one other thing that's great, thank you. And I actually wrote that down, to be interesting, to be interested, right? I think it is common sense, and I think it's a way of phrasing it that we should all think about more often. One other thing you touched on at the very beginning was just, maybe just the impact of in person versus the virtual all the time. Take
I
it away
am
on
a
that.
yeah, huge proponent of it. I know that it's shifting a lot. There's a lot of return to office policies that can be really challenging because we've built lives with more flexibility, or thinking we could find a job that's fully remote if we need to. Um, I think that it's a huge differentiator. So the people that show up, the tactile thing, there's candidates that have shown up with their physical resume, and I don't forget them, versus the people that are just going to send something over on LinkedIn. So I would just say continuing to try and get out there and meet with people, and don't be afraid to print something out. Don't be afraid to hand it to them. Physical business cards, they kind of were lame for a while. Now I'm like, oh no, I actually have saved some of those, and they're really helpful to have at the end of a meetup and actually look at. So that I think there's a wave back towards that the people who lean into it, it will help them stand out from the crowd a lot.
Very cool. We only have 2 minutes left. I wanted to just reach out to the rest of the audience to see, are there any questions, comments, suggestions, anything you wish that we had touched on in this session? Okay, well, if not, Hudson, thank you so much. This was a great session. I think we all learned a ton. And any last words of wisdom or pearls from you?
No, I think just I love what Sidebar is doing from the exposure I've gotten, cheering for everyone on here. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I'm not quick at responding on there, but I do appreciate the connections and just an open invite. If anyone comes through Chattanooga, our space, the arena is downtown. You're welcome to come by. And then if Allo Hire can be of service to you, please let us know on either side of the equation. We primarily start with the employer and then go find the people, but we like to try to reverse recruit from starting with the individual when we can. So thank you guys so much for letting me come on and share. I'll continue to document my story on LinkedIn as we keep learning, and I hope everybody has an amazing rest of your day.
Great, thank you. For those of you who are on and everyone who RSVP, we'll send out a survey shortly. So thanks so much for your time. We'll see you at the next session.